Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this yet another webinar on portfolio management, together with my co-hosts Robert and Theo. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Serge. I'm a principal Agile consultant with Xebia, been there for quite a while. And in my day-to-day job, I also do consulting for large companies, like Philips, that we are talking about as well, and Theo with my colleague as well. Let's start with Theo first. Theo, could you introduce yourself first?
Hello, Theo, also a consultant at Xebia, doing training and lots of consulting now with the tax company, the tax government organization, and also with the energy company in the Netherlands.
Cool. And finally, our guest, Robert.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Robert de Moet. I'm the Agile Portfolio Lead within the Digital Marketing and E-commerce department in Philips, where we are bringing Agile Portfolio Management as a structured way of working Agile.
Yeah. Indeed. So today's theme is top-down or bottom-up. We already, of course, as we do, we had some previous talks, and so what is it all about? And of course, it's interesting to first have a bit of a definition, because as we were talking about it, we did want to, there was an initial confusion, right? There was like, are we talking about the change, bottom-up or top-down, or actually talking about the elements of how it works, like the whole mechanism works? So let's first start a bit about the elements. Like, what is if we would define top, and I'm basically opening the floor to both of you, if we are defining what is the top part of portfolio management? When we say the top part, what does it mean with you?
Yeah.
Let's start here. I think top part elements are formulating or defining vision, communicating vision, goals, business drivers, guardrails, rules, guidelines. Those kinds of things, those are needed to set up, what are we talking about, and to set up the structure that enables you to determine what do we find important, what do we think is valuable. If you don't have that, then from the top you can't do anything.
No. Robert, what's your definition of what the top elements are of portfolio management?
Yeah, but within portfolio management, I think it's most important that you have there the vision of what you are going to do. So on a high level, how do you want to expand or evolve what you are working upon, whether that is in our case an e-commerce platform or any other thing that you are working on? You need to have that vision, because that vision in the end is a guidance for the rest of the organization on where is your direction. And I think it's really important that you have that as a guiding North Star first to be able to start working within portfolio. And from that perspective, it's also really important, as Theo already mentioned, that you have a few things in place. So in our situation, this is resourcing, teams, budgets, but also how you organize yourself to be able to achieve that vision that you have as an organization. So the top part is really about structuring people, vision, where you want to go.
Yeah, so the high level stuff. Yeah, so basically you agree on most of the things. I basically was checking it off. So you agree on vision, you agree on kind of like there's elements of like defining guidelines and the guardrails and things like that. And I guess it's also like a set of events, artifacts, and sort of teams, right? Groups of people, and that makes up also, yes. There's a bit of an organizational structure at that level. So we can talk about those a bit later.
As we discussed before, you could say that that structure is setting up the Lego parts of the organization. If you have set up the right parts, you can do stuff.
Yeah, indeed. Just by the way, just before I forget to say it to the audience, I have the chat open here. I am keeping an eye on the chat, so if there's any questions that you ask, I will try to kind of put any questions, and I read them, and if I see they're relevant to the current discussion, I will take them into account. So by all means, put your questions in the chat, and I'll see if I can get around to them. Like last time, if we don't get around to them, the three of us, we had a lot of fun in making sure that every question got answered. So
Yes, yeah.
it will get answered, maybe just not during the session itself. So just, the chat is here, so for you. Having said that, so Theo, you already kind of did a bit of a preempted to what the bottom-up part is. You talked about Lego blocks, etc. Could you then start talking about what the bottom parts of the portfolio management are? What is that really? What are we talking about then?
Yeah. So let's talk about what is needed on the bottom part. So we talked about value, and value is very important for estimation, for prioritization. But you also need estimations, and who is doing the estimating? The people who are doing the work, right? So that's definitely bottom part. If you don't have that, then you have a gap. If things are in place or if they are running, then you also need status. What's the status of your projects or your initiatives or your epics, whatever you will call them. You need the capacity, and capacity can only be defined if you have the Lego blocks in place. So if you have a little bit of a stable structure where you can say, okay, this my organization can do such and such in this amount of time or in this period. You have to look at, do we have the right capabilities on the work floor? Do we have the right knowledge? Do we have the experience? Do we have them connected in the right way? Basically, can we do the stuff that we want to do? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And Robert, what is for you like the bottom part of portfolio management?
Yeah, well, I think that without repeating a lot what Theo already mentioned, but I think for us it's the most important thing is that we are creating self-empowered teams. Mm-hmm. Which at itself is already quite a challenge. And with self-empowered teams, it's really important that you have the right mix of competences in your teams, that you have a product owner who can work end-to-end and can create a product owner vision of where he would like to go with his team to develop on the product that is he responsible for. I think that is most important. Product owners should not be bothered with stuff that you have, let's say, in the top that is budget related or those kinds of things. The product owner should work more on value, and in the end, that value should translate in what we define in the top on the values that we would like to create with the strategy that we have.
Yeah. So
it's interesting what you're saying, Robert, because you should also think explicitly about what you should not do on a certain level. So the work floor should not be bothered with, the finance, the budgeting. That's something for the top organization. But the top organization should not be bothered and should not be really, should not be explicitly concerned with too much detail. There are different levels, so keep them out of the make the distinction there.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the things that you should put in place if you start with implementing an agile portfolio management structure, is that you really define on which level which elements you are going to manage. And I think if you start without having that vision that is shared with everybody, then you can talk about top and bottom, but in the end you will not meet each other in the middle.
Yeah. Of course, the reason I'm using these word terminology because it's the title of the webinar. So it's bottom up or top down. And of course, like the way we're talking right now, it sounds a bit hierarchical, right? The work floor and the top and the bottom and stuff like that. So, but still, I mean, since I wanted to kind of tie it in thematically to what we're talking about and what the title is. But I do kind of take away from what both of you say is essentially that, the quote unquote real work happens in the bottom part. The top part makes sure that essentially the enabling constraints are there, right? So that oh yeah, so I don't have to worry about the budget anymore. That's arranged for me. I can just go, just work, go for the value. You don't have to. There's no less infighting or stuff stuff has been arranged so that you can just move forward. Also, I liked what you said, Theo, about estimation, status, capacity, and you both mentioned vision. So it's sort of vision and direction kind of flows from the top to the bottom, and reality flows back upwards, right? Well, exactly. but this is the reality. This is the capacity. This is the status. This is how it really is working, etc. So those are some elements that need to be done. Okay, cool. What I thought was also interesting to kind of separate the two, because of course the realistic answer is going to be, well, it's a bit of both, right? That's going to be the engineer's answer, and it depends, and all that kind of stuff. But let's not do that. Let's take them separately and say, okay, kind of go from this thing well, you can't do it if it's not top down, right? It makes no sense. You have to start with the top down. So let's and then later basically do the reverse. So. And it also deals, of course, a bit with the change, right? If you want to kind of change and change the whole thing and start out top down, what would be reasons to do so, and what is the important thing? So let's talk about that. So the first thing I like to talk about, why, if we have the statement, but of course we have to start at the top. What would be reasons to do so? What are the compelling reasons to say top first?
That's Robert. You're first. Otherwise, it's always the same.
The top goes first, right? Yeah.
Well, obviously, I hear both on a daily basis. Why should you do stuff top down, and should you do stuff bottom up? I would like to quickly come back to one thing that you said.
Yeah.
So, work floor and management. It's really difficult to change that mindset. That is what I see on a daily basis. Somehow, within a lot of organizations, this is kind of programmed in your DNA.
Yeah.
And that's also why you kind of naturally feel that this top-down way of working, that should be guiding, because this is how companies usually do. And the great thing is you can do top-down also in an agile way, because then from the top you can give direction to product owners and teams on what they can develop iteratively, of course, because they need to work in this bi-weekly cycle.
That's a newfangled thing, this iterative thing. Yeah. No, but let me make this a bit more clear. What are the compelling reasons to start there? Let's say if you do not start at the top, if you do not start with your leaders, etc., what goes wrong if you start implementing portfolio management and you don't deal with the top part first? What's going wrong then?
So going with this direction, Serge, I would say you have to start at the top, because the leaders of the organizations, if they don't understand what is needed, then of course, the whole setup will go wrong. So they need to understand that it is very important to create the right conditions for teams or for people on the that are doing the actual work to be able to excel and to take ownership, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So and this is an easy sentence to say, but it is pretty difficult, because we already said. That might mean to work in much more shorter cycles than they are used to. It might mean to give away decision power or mandate. It might mean being more clear about what you actually want without saying how to do it.
Yeah.
And those are all, it's easy to say those things, but you have to. It's different from what the people are used to, and maybe even different what they learned. So I had a manager once that said, "Okay, Theo, nice talk that you're having now, but I've invested 25 years in my management style, and I'm not going to change it from one day to the other, because that might be difficult for me, and I was successful in the past 25 years. So you have to be very compelling to me before I will change my style." And if you don't change the style, then this can't work. So it's pretty complex in that way.
Just so, maybe do you have some concrete examples? Maybe also we like to talk concretely, of course.
About the
like,
good top-down things or the bad top-down
things? The bad
things?
ones, like, because it's more fun, right?
The bad ones is more fun.
It's more fun. So what actually, like, if it doesn't work, can you give me some examples of how you've seen it fail because of that?
Well, for me, it's pretty obvious what I have seen how we fail. When we started working in agile fashion, one of the first portfolio events that we introduced into the organization was our quarterly review meeting, or PI planning, or at least everybody comes together once per quarter and you decide on what you are going to do for the next 3 months. What went completely wrong there is that from the top down, we said, you know what would be great? If you could deliver all of this work in the next 3 months.
Yeah, how hard can it be, right?
It's not difficult because you have an estimation on the top because you want to make sure that your strategy is being delivered. You have your goals that need to be met. You have customers that are calling you and sending you emails about stuff that is important. So what happened is that every quarterly business review that we had, we get top down a priority list that was too much for the product owners to deliver upon. Yeah. Nobody wanted to hear.
Yeah.
To expand on that, Robert, even worse. So I think everybody recognized this, but yes. I think also everybody will recognize that on top of this, you also have during, let's say, the 3 months or even smaller time scales, on top of the push that is already there, during the period, something will happen that say, but now you should work on this as well. So even more. So the strategy was this, but no, it was wrong. This is now important. If you don't work on this, everything goes wrong. But even changing on a short time scale, very important things that disrupt the whole flow and the whole.
But if you're agile, you can do that, Theo. I mean, this is agility. You can change on the go.
Oh yeah, so agility as an excuse for chaos.
What I'm talking about is doing it in an unstructured way. So if you're doing the Agile Portfolio Management, you can change pretty fast, but in a way that is understandable from the top to the bottom. So if you're thinking about what goes wrong, so if you don't have a understood process of changing your strategy on the short time scale, and also this is one sentence, but everybody should understand and everybody should be ready for this. So if you're ready to change in 2 weeks, then it's okay. But if you don't expect it and if you're not ready for it, then it's definitely not okay. So that's another thing. You have to do this top down, otherwise it won't work.
Yeah. But the reality is that implementing Agile Portfolio Management Framework is a change process. Mm-hmm. And going through a change process means also that you do things wrong. What I experience myself is that if you want to do top-down really well, people in the top should understand what is their role, and I think there is something that we easily step over when going through a change, and the result of that is that it's not going to be easy to be able to implement certain portfolio management events that are really important that people connect with each other to do the right communications, prioritizations, and decision making. And in the end, you need to have a choice that how are you going to solve that? And in our case, a lot came bottom up actually.
Yeah, because because we will be talking about bottom up, but I think also to summarize somewhat. Is that, if I take it, is that the reason you need to start top-down, if anything, is because otherwise you get a sort of the violations of the rules of the game. There's a game you want to play in a certain style, and if your leadership doesn't understand that, they'll constantly be breaking those rules, doing things differently. And one of the biggest ones, and that's also my personal experience, is the infinite capacity problem. right? One of the things I've seen over and over again is that that when you start out, then you ask each team how much do you have to do, and then there's a list of 30 things they have to do at the same time. And that's just the fact, and I think one of the most important things about the top-down part is the stop doing that, right? Understand the rules of the game, understand that you don't have infinite capacity, or behave like it, and the things are stacked on top of. So that's one of the most important things, I think. So in the sense of enabling, is kind of creating space for everybody and making sure that, given the fact that, fundamentally, of course, portfolio management is about, we have finite resources. We cannot do everything at the same time, and how do we make maximum use of the resources that we do have? And so if you don't want to,
Just to add to that, so you said just now maximize the resources, and if you put it another way, then you're using maximize resource utilization.
I meant maximize the value you get out of finite resources.
Right. That's why I wanted to answer that. So if you focus on resource utilization only, then you are going to get lots of people working, their asses off, but you might not get the value that you want. Instead, you might get, traffic jams in the flow of the work instead of flowing work and getting value. So watch out for that.
Having said that, I think one of the first questions that was in the chat, and I'm sort of looking for, when is a nice moment to put this thing in, because when we're talking about top-down, we're also automatically talking about the problem of classic hierarchy, micromanagement, right? The kind of the top-down dictating part of thing. And so Mark has a question here: how do you ensure self-powered teams have the right mandate, prevent micromanagement from the top, give trust that they make the right choices in the what and how? How do you steer on outcomes?
So two things, or maybe more, but at least two things. So how do you ensure mandate on the level that's needed, right? So there has to be some giving away there. You have to give away decision power, and you have to do that top down. Because if you don't give away the decision power, then you won't get the behavior that is needed for this to work. That's one thing, and the other thing is. Somehow communicate vision and strategy. If you don't have it, then the people on the floor that actually do the work will either do what they think is right, it's okay, but that might not be aligned with what you want on the leadership level. And so both, it's work, it's giving away and it's making clear what you want.
Yeah. So this question has been bothering me personally as well for I think the last 1.5 years. How can you create self-empowered teams? And trust me, it's not an easy one. I think in an organization that is going agile, everybody would like to end up there, but the road towards there is not easy. It's also about who is taking the lead to make sure that you can build this self-empowered teams. Within digital marketing and e-commerce, with Portfolio, we are taking the lead to ensure that there are a few things that is really important to be able to get to this self-empowered teams. First of all, we are constantly repeating that the only thing that we are committing upon is the work that we do in the coming 3 months. Everything else is an idea, it's a vision, it's fake, it can change. It's a message that you need to repeat constantly for quite a long time before people get that in their system, that agile way of working means that you commit on the short term, you have a vision on the long term. And I think within Portfolio, we are taking the lead there to bring that into the organization. We are also embedding that in the events that we are implementing within DMAC to make sure that it's landing. The other one, what is also difficult but equally important to do, is product owners need to give transparency in the work what they are doing. So if you have commitments on these 3 months, transparency is needed. It needs to be clear what are you exactly going to do and what value are you going to deliver with that. Next to that, the vision that you have for your product for the coming, let's say, 3 quarters also needs to be there, including for which customer it is, which value it will deliver, and when you are going to release that. Without that transparency, you will create, let's say, a behavior that is in nature in traditional organizations, which means micromanagement, control, daily meetings, a lot of explaining what you are doing, where you are, status updates, etc., etc. So to bring these 2 things in place, I think is the most important thing to do, to be able to come to the moment that you can say, hey, we have self-empowered teams. And I think portfolio management is taking a leading role there.
Yeah. And Robert, you talked about transparency. That's the transparency from the bottom. So on the top again, transparency will also mean you will hear things that you won't like. So the question is, how do you handle that? So are you going to hit people that are giving you bad news? Or are you going to ask the question, okay, this is not going as we would like. How can we change things? How can we help the people that are actually doing the work to make it go the right way, instead of saying you're not doing the right thing and it's your problem?
Yeah. I think the steps that we take with Agile Portfolio Management framework in digital marketing and e-commerce are the following. We have 3 levels. The top level, strategy level, is where our leadership is really leading. This is the vision for 12 to 24 months. They need to set the way for where we would like to develop our e-commerce platform. That's also to do with following trends, making sure that we are connecting to the markets and the businesses that we have worldwide within Philips. We have the bottom part, which is the 0 to 6 months. This is the domain of the product owner. This is where they are delivering actual value, where they are delivering what they have committed on for 0 to 3 months, where they have the vision of 3 to 6 months. This is an area that you cannot influence too much, because you have teams. Teams need to work on stuff, and to be able to interfere in there, you should not want to do that. So where do you connect those 2? That is in the 6 to 12 months visions. It's really important that you have there where the 2 worlds meet each other. Because then you can make sure that a team can be self-empowered on the 0 to 6 month vision. You make decisions and prioritizations on the 6 to 12 months, and you get a vision where you need to go to on the 12 to 24 months. And we have events around that to bring these people together. But I have experienced that separating these 3 levels, really making clear vision, prioritization, and deployment, you should bring into your organization as soon as possible, including the roles and the responsibility, because that is creating transparency that people are looking for.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I just want to kind of close off the final thing. I also have something myself to say on this topic, is that what I've seen also in most of the times an organization starts with, you can say, a mandate that is owned by the larger group. I've also recently been looking a lot into Sociocracy, because personally, my personal opinion is that the next wave for Agile is going to come out of the Sociocratic methods, because it has some fundamentally better answers to how do you distribute mandate, how do you distribute power, so to speak, to do that. And one thing, I'll also put it into the chat, because it's in sociocracy30.org. And then, I'm typing it wrong. Just let me type it correctly. So, sociocracy30.org. And then look for a thing called Delegation Canvas. Delegation Canvas. I've got some very nice experience with that. It's a technique where you basically agree with each other. Essentially, say, here's a pie of my, you're a leader, and you have basically the mandate of the whole company. And then you basically tell to some of the people in your organization, well, we need to sort of, in a mature fashion, hand over this mandate, because that's kind of where the problem lies. I think the reason we are stuck with hierarchy so much is because we don't have the social technology to deal with any other way. So let's just do it with a person who decides, right? So we don't have the technology for it. And I think Sociocratic methods have tools and techniques for it. So a delegation canvas is an interesting tool where, and it's been really great, where you basically define what is the purpose of that circle, whatever it may be, right? It could be a role, could be a team. So, or a whole Agile release train, right? It's always like a scope of mandate that you get. So it comprises of, so who are the stakeholders? Do you actually know who they are? What's the purpose of that mandate group? What is its responsibilities, constraints? What are the products they deliver? But also, what do they need? What are the dependencies? You basically talk through the whole thing. And what I've found is, in terms of like delegation, it basically creates space because you've agreed with each other in a sort of formal fashion. That's yours now.
Yeah.
To truly hand it over and to say that's yours, etc. And as long as we, keep within those agreements, etc., that's yours to decide. That more explicit handing over and defining of what that mandate is, I found in an organization that I was, because it was so unclear. Basically, everybody was constantly piling on, and everybody was constantly stepping over, and even leaders, because they didn't have a clear agreement on where do I begin and where do you end. Because that was not clear, they were constantly stepping over each other's boundaries, but also peers, like stepping over each other's boundaries. And so it's a great tool, and I would also advise everybody, if you really want to have sort of a empowerment discussion, to use a canvas like this to then truly kind of negotiate what the thing is.
We are embedding that actually within the value streams. So my ask to the leadership is that if you are looking at the 12 to 24 months that you want, which are the products or the systems or the services that we want to develop? Write down what is your objectives from a strategy perspective as a leadership for this products or this service or this system that we need to develop. And also write down what are your key results that you want to achieve with this. Yeah. And indeed, we have a canvas with that is really describing, okay, this is a kind of the definition of done. You put in there acceptance criteria of that product and the system and the service that needs to be delivered. We define for what customer it needs to be done, which are your stakeholders, and then, of course, your objectives and your key results. And you can hand that over to a product owner and say, listen, this can be your next assignment with your team. Do you want to take it, yes or no?
Yeah, to truly hand it over. Exactly. And when I say with the canvas, takes that further, that it's not just the goals.
No.
So it's also constraints or dependencies or kind of skill sets, all kinds of things that you need. It's like, this is your little area now, or big area. I mean, it could be a full department, right? But whatever it is, this is handed to you now, and I like the fact that there is a bit of formality to it in the sense of, but it creates clarity. I don't think there's right or wrong, but there's clarity.
So could you say that it means transparency on mandate? So make the mandates and all things around it explicit.
Yes.
Explicit, transparent, clear, no question. Okay, this is from you. This is for me. This is how we interact with each other. This is how we will check whether it's going the right way. Those kinds of things, right?
Yeah. Because if you, in our case, if you are really defining objectives and key results, you can also make clear to the product owner, this is where we are going to measure you upon, and the product owner can say that's fine. You have defined a key result. These are the 5 or 10 epics that is going to deliver on one of your key results. And with that, this vision of the roadmap that the product owner has becomes a kind of menu that everybody understands. Oh, they are working. This are the epics that are going to deliver on this key result that we have defined. These are the ones that are going to deliver on that key results. If everything is delivered, the objective is there, and all of a sudden, people start talking the same language, and that is what you want to achieve. And that official handing over moment, that's also what that should be there.
Yeah.
That should be there.
It's even a negotiation. And what's interesting, actually, in the canvas, there is also delegator responsibilities. Yeah. It's not like chucking it over the wall and saying have fun. It also says, well, I'm the or a group, right? It doesn't have to be a leader. A group handing over to a subgroup and saying, here, this is your, because that's of course how it would work in Sociocracy, is the larger group giving a mandate to a smaller group and saying, this is what you're allowed to decide for us, right? And so we're handing this over to you. And also to answer Hugo's question in the chat, do I understand correctly that the delegation canvas solves how to prove your outcomes? Actually, it doesn't really. It's not about proving the outcomes. It's more about defining what are you allowed to decide, right? And let's say a bigger group. Let's say we're a very big group, and we all want to have a barbecue together. Yeah. And then there is a small working group that says that the whole group says, you arrange the barbecue. You can decide, right? And basically the handing over from the whole group is like, whatever the venue is, etc. Well, we have these constraints. Like we wouldn't like it to be at the beach because we have small kids and we don't want them to fall into the water. But as long as you agree with that constraint, everything is good, fine. Here's your mandate. So that's what the delegation canvas does. It basically kind of creates the space and says, here, go out, have fun, make the decisions for us. I would like to make a switch to the bottom up. And actually, I would like to start that with a quote from Ronald in the chat. Why do you continue calling people resources? Could you please stop doing so? Resource utilization belongs on the garbage heap of a project organization. People are unique with unique skills and competences. Then please treat them as such. Very correct, Ronald. It's not for nothing that we kind of started with this top-down thing because, of course, there was a bit of top-down language going with it. Completely agree with that. So we should not use the word resource anymore. Otherwise, Ronald will kick our ass. But let's start with from the bottom up part now, right? So what does it mean from there?
I'm also a resource.
Yeah, you are. It's also what your organization is used to, right? But I actually agree because
I don't see it as a bad word personally. Yeah, I mean,
right. But it's used as such. I also do know it, but I also wanted to kind of make this a bit of a segue into. Now let's talk about that world. Let's talk about the starting from the bottom up part, and also think, and also I'll also want to add. Actually, Jeff had to step out, but I'll still give the quote that he gave. In our organizations, priorities are not so much driven from the top. The reason we need to do portfolio management is the finite pool of technical resources doing the work. Well, here it says resources, actually. Maybe that was the reason why Ronald said that. So the technical teams, etc., the actual teams doing the work. We're really curious how to do this effectively. PST or our organization. So
what you're saying, Serge, is you have to start bottom at the bottom, or you have to focus on the bottom because that's where the knowledge is.
Yeah. So indeed. So let's talk about that. So. Why, if we say, let's turn it around, bullshit. Don't start from the top because that's nonsense. Because you'll be building it on a layer, like I would say, you'll build it on a layer of sand, right? Instead of something solid. What are reasons to start from the bottom?
So I would say,
what are the component parts of it?
Yeah, I would say start at the bottom because then. That's where the work is happening. It's we are talking about people and we are not talking about resource. I don't like the word resources as well. There you can start with a small group of people showing that this actually works. And if you show that it works, then you can build upon that. You can. For example, Robert talked about product owners quite a bit already. If you have a very good product owner that is able to push back the push, so actually say, this is what we can handle, and not more, and he organizes it on a very small scale that it works, and he is transparent about it. He shows results. He shows what he means by outcome. He or she, but of course can also be she, shows on a small scale this works, and this is how it works because it's actually done. It's proof that it works. I would say that's why you have to start bottom up because the people on strategy won't be comfortable to change things because they might not have seen it. Never. Do they actually believe that this can work?
Yeah. So part of your answer is the reason you have to start from the bottom up is because there is a level of, especially if you're starting, there's a level of proof needed to basically show how the mechanics work. That the fact that the kind of, for instance, that iterative is a thing and that it delivers anything anyway. And then but sort of inspire interesting, we can do something with this, right? That's kind of what you're meaning, right?
Yeah,
Robert, what's your take on why do you need to start from the bottom?
Well, first of all, we are doing a lot of our change bottom up. And there is a simple reason for that. We have a great leadership, but they have not been in the development area probably never in their life. They are great leaders, yeah? So why do you do things bottom up? Because a product owner and his team, they understand the landscape that we are working on, our IT landscape. They understand the tools that we have. They understand the possibilities that we can do. They have a clear view on what we can develop and what not. They even understand what needs to be developed first before you can develop something else. So vision-wise, there is where we are building what I call the product owner's vision roadmap. Because there is the reality.
Yeah.
Top down, you can ask anything from a product owner, but it's actually irrelevant because the product owner and his team are the only experts who can clearly make decisions what they can do and what they cannot do based on the platform what you have, based on your IT structure, based on the capacity that you have, based on the dependencies that you have with other teams in your organization. So, as I said, bottom up, we're doing quite a lot because the knowledge is actually within the teams. And that is what the leadership needs to get an understanding on. So that's why I say bottom up, yes.
Yeah. But also, this is actually an illustration of how the bottom up, top, because basically you are a leader of the portfolio management world. And basically what I like to hear is this is what you would like a leader to say. Yeah. Essentially what you're doing now is sort of creating that safe space for the teams and saying, we need to respect their opinions. Yeah. We need to make sure, etc. So that's one of the things, like as far as good behavior is concerned, I think you shown a great example of that, is just that message of, if we don't start believing our teams that when they say they cannot do it or when they say they're full, then we should say they're full instead of just keeping on pushing. Yeah.
Yeah, so another example, Serge, from practice. A few years ago, I was guiding some teams, and there was one, a person that was called Scrum Master, but was actually, a very important change agent in the organization, and he on the work floor, on the level where it actually happens, he removed all impediments that there were, and that means giving the people the right tooling, so the right computers, pushing away management with all kinds of annoying questions, helping people to give feedback to each other, making them proud when they achieved something, making them feel ashamed when it didn't go well and they should know it. Organizing, let's say, intake meetings on team level in such a way that this team that started, it was an ordinary team, but they grew very fast to a pretty good team. And they actually were so proud of that they said, wait a minute, we are going to take ownership of who is entering our team here. So if you're not showing that you actually belong with us, with the good team that we are, you can go away again. It's you're not entering our team. No. So he created an environment on a very small scale where people were really proud of what they achieved, and if you need people on the work floor to do that.
Yeah, I must tell you, Theo, I fully agree with you. But if you are looking, so I'm constantly looking always at portfolio as well, and what can we do different. We are always bringing the message towards the product owners: say no, say no, say no, say no. But there is a clear responsibility for a portfolio part as well. We also need to say no. And we also need to say no to leadership when they are asking too much. There is a responsibility, I think, from an Agile Portfolio Management framework point of view, that you are setting the guardrails on how you want to work in the organization. And that means that you need to say no. You need to say no to people. You need to say no to the externals that are outside of your organization. You need to say also no to your leadership. And this is, I think, a role that is not naturally taken by a portfolio organization, because they don't always recognize you as having that mandate. And I would really encourage everybody who is in portfolio, try to find it. Try to find it.
Thing. Yeah, if I add to that, to make things explicit, saying no, so you could say start at the bottom saying no and then cascade up. So make saying no explicit and how you can say no. That's definitely part of the transformation.
Yeah. I would like to hook into that because this is like my contribution to that discussion is. In my personal experience, I would say it's the difference between the sand, building something out of a sand. The sandcastle is very weak, and first you need Lego blocks before you can actually like build something clear. I have seen over and over myself is that if the teams themselves are not solid, if they're not working well, and like you said, the transparency part in terms of if the team is not like dedicated enough or doesn't really have a sense of where are we heading, a sense of their capacity, like you said, Theo, if they don't have a sense of forecasting, that ability to simply say, because portfolio management by its definition almost is looking a bit further in the future and synchronizing a large other teams of groups, so if as a team you have no idea when stuff will get done, if you have 30 things to do at the same time, and it's already that broken at that level, what are you portfolio managing then? Because there's nothing to do. And so to make the case for the bottom-up part is I fully believe that if you do not start with creating some solid teams, and even if the portfolio makes no sense at all, even if you're doing from a portfolio management level, you could say the wrong things, I still believe it's worth it just to have the teams start working solidly, having a lens of cadence to them, having a sense of like a solid, okay, this is what we're doing now. We know how fast we can go. We know what our problems are. And if we now have to project into the future, so also that ability for indeed, the coming 3 months or whatever, we know we're kind of probably going to do this, this, and this, and now we're full. And I've seen over and over again that inability of a team to be able to say, and now we're full, and to do it with data or like with the velocity management, all that kind of things. Yeah. It just meant that those teams had no way of saying, well, we don't know if we're full. Oh, so then maybe you can do this as well. And then you get this stack of 30 projects that have to be done at the same time. Now, taking that to the next level, if the teams aren't even able to say for themselves, this is how full we are, this is how much we can handle, and that will mean that this will have to be postponed and that will be postponed. How do you ever think at a portfolio management level you have the information to make the decisions you want to make? Because you have no clue. You have no clue what you're managing. And I think
I was thinking, Serge, show that it works by how it works. That's what you're saying now.
But also, I think it's one of that information that you need, because what is the information you're managing from a portfolio management is indeed there is a finite amount of work we can do. There was always 1,000 ideas, and there's always less people to do it. So it's that fundamental. If you don't know how full you are, game over. And so that's like my case for making sure, and I think both of you echoed that in some fashion already. But the biggest reason for me for bottom up is you don't have no clue what you're managing if you don't have the data for it. If you now have no sense of capacity, no sense of forecasting, no sense what's coming at you, it's just useless exercise.
Interesting, by the way, Serge, because sometimes you hear in organizations that, okay, we are doing agile, so now we're not doing forecasting. We have a velocity, but it's our team velocity. We don't want to communicate that because it's our team velocity. Nobody has anything to do with that. I think that's not the right approach. It's very, very important that you do communicate your velocity and what it means, but we can do this and not more, instead of making your team a isolated part of the organization without any connection to the rest.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that I'm always trying to approach stuff really pragmatically. So, what does the Agile theory says? The Agile theory says a team is looking at his velocity by estimating what he can do in the next 2 weeks. After the 2 weeks, he will look back and sees whether he could do it or not, and learns from that. And over the coming iterations, weeks, months, half year or whatever, they have that much references created in their team that they will be able to be very good at determining how much work they can do in 2 weeks. From the portfolio level, I approach the same theory here with the product owners when I'm talking about their product owner visions. So they tell me in the next 3 months, this is what I'm able to do. If they cannot do that, then we look at, okay, but if you were not able to deliver that in the past 3 months, you have spillover to the next 3 months. How comfortable are you with what you are going to commit to in the next 3 months? And what you see, if you ask that questions enough times in a quarter, you will see that teams, they start to think differently, because they say then, okay, based on the learnings from the past quarter and the quarter before, we tend to promise too much. So why don't we start promising less? And you will see that even on that bigger scale, a team is capable to come up with a good estimation of what they can do in 3 months without that they even have in place what they can do on a bi-weekly basis. So you should stimulate and also give them the space to learn on that level.
Yeah, I think the as far as like a management style is to emphasize that ability to forecast, which implies a lot of things, as more important than just raw performance. Don't ask for performance, ask for the ability to forecast and knowing what's coming at you, because a lot of stuff follows from that. There has to be a level of quality in the way you deliver. There has to be a level of planning and forecasting, maturity, etc. There's a lot of maturity that goes into being able to do that. And then just saying, are you actually able to kind of consistently forecast what you are doing? And it's not really about the forecast per se, but that ability, and that's also what I've seen many times. Like another customer I was with, the first like big planning that we did with the whole. And that time was like all projects and 30 projects at the same time, and the whole thing just meant nothing. And so the first thing I did, I taught every single product owner how to do their backlog correctly, how to estimate correctly with the team, and then come in with something where they could plot out and say, okay, it's still a guess, but based on what we're doing, we're approximately here. And that was already so much more solid. And it's what I've seen over and over with leadership. All of a sudden, like, I see transparency now. I see what's coming up. Yeah. I might not like the answer, but given the way kind of sort of the answer was brought up and the fact that there was a sort of sense of, this is based on some real, knowledge and data and thinking, I'm actually able to trust that. And it was also an experience thing, is that what I liked about like what happened then was that leadership then said, and even all the stakeholders are surrounding it, they say, I'm not happy with the answer. But then they said the second most interesting thing, but I understand why. Yeah. Because that became clear. Yeah. It was
that happens all the time.
That happens all the time.
Happens all the time. Interestingly, by the way, if you're looking at attitude and for example courage, courage is a Scrum value. The people will learn to have the courage to say what they can actually do instead of what they think is the desirable answer.
Yeah, actually, the thing is also a mindset. So if you overpromise and you don't deliver, nobody's happy with you, and you will get into this a negative spiral. Yeah. If you underpromise, you will have options to improve. If you are able to promise what you can deliver, you are a perfect team. But if you need to choose out of these three, I would always say, you as a team, you will have a much better reputation if you deliver more than you promised than if you cannot deliver what you initially promised. So be realistic as a team, whether it's a 2 weeks forecast on what you are going to do or a 3 months forecast on what you are going to do. It will never help you as a team to overpromise.
Yeah. Well, there, of course, we're closing like the 11 o'clock a bit, because like this triggers me so much, because actually the thing I wanted to say, well, maybe I should say it anyway, because it's so fun.
Say it anyway.
It's fun to talk about. Like in Agile, especially with the way you estimate, it actually doesn't matter if you overpromise, as long as you overpromise consistently.
Yeah, that's
Dale will get that one.
Yeah.
Because,
absolutely.
Because that's the fun part. Because if you know that you have a constant error, you can correct for that error, as long as you're consistent. So the funny thing is actually that consistency of your forecast is actually more important.
Yeah.
Because consistently wrong still allows you to go, because once I said, I still remember that was a guy who was presenting, he said, yeah, but we were constantly like over-promising 50%, constantly. And then I raised my hand, and after the quick Q&A I said, but what's the problem here? Because that consistency of over-promising exactly 50% means you know exactly what you can deliver, right? And he was like, yeah, that's a good point, actually. So yeah, that's just... I wanted to kind of close out also with some... there's some interesting remarks in the chat as well. Just to answer Hugo about the delegation canvas, he made the remark, it's more like a contract between parties then. Yes, it is. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Robin had a question. Who represents the bottom in this conversation? POs, users, question mark, customers, question mark? Who represents, quote unquote, the
so
bottom?
In my mind, when I'm talking about is the bottom is the people that do the work, so the teams with the product owner. I always separate out the people that do the work for somebody else. That's the customer or maybe your stakeholders or whatever. So in the conversations I had that in mind. So the people that do the work.
Yeah. So I would agree. Like users and customers are sort of, when we're talking about a system that has a portfolio management on it, it's a system that delivers something to their customers.
Yeah.
So you would agree that
we all
users
agree
and customers
that,
are sort of in this discussion. They're sort of outside what we're talking about here, right?
Well,
exactly.
The whole organization delivers to them.
The product owner is in the team, the representatives of the customer. So they are in there through the product owner. Yeah. So to me, the team and the product owner, they are that bottom part, and the customer is connected to that through the product owner, because the product owner is the one who should have contact with the customers.
Good point, but it depends on your domains, and that's when I think I should take back from the delegation canvas, because what if I also was working for, like, for instance, TomTom NavKit? That's like a massive amount of like software, 15 teams at the same time, like being this hugely complex bit of software, but it's one product in the end, like 15 teams delivering towards one product. In that case, I can imagine that the representation of the customer is at the total level. So it makes more sense that the overall product manager is the one representing the customer, because you said the customer is interested in the total package of everything.
That's why you have chief product owners.
Yeah, and in your case, I think when you're saying, well, the product owners, I could imagine that that's a case where you could say, in the way the domains have been distributed and the value streams have been distributed, is that there is a kind of a mapping of a subsection of your organization onto a certain specific set of users. And there I would say it's very logical that you say, kind of with splitting out that domain in this value stream or whatever it may be, that actually comes with a specific set of customers. And it would also make sense that that specific set of customers get directly connected to that product owner, and therefore they become the representative of that product owner, customer. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you mean, but I would say that everybody should put customer first, even if you are a team that is only doing testing, because if you are testing certain features, if they can be released, you need to take into account the customer. Some features are about NPS. The pictures should load fast. Videos should start up quickly, etc., etc. So in everything that you do, there is a customer aspect embedded, even for a testing team that is not creating anything for the customer.
Yeah. So, but maybe to summarize that then is if we're talking about like the system we're talking about, we were discussing, the product owners are inside of that system, and the users and customers also by definition, not because that's what you're doing it for, right? That's the definition we had to have. Yeah. But I think it's a very good point that you make, is that, but if everybody kind of has to feel like the representative of the user customer, have them front and center, the whole organization needs to do that, even though they're outside of that system that we're talking about. They need to go into that. Let's see, with some final words. Actually, it's 10:58. It is very close to closing time. I see that Bas had a whole bunch of questions, and I don't think that we will be able to.
We will email it to you, Bas.
Yeah, Bas, we will.
And to the others, Yeah,
and actually, Luc had a very nice book tip. He said 50 Tinten Nee, so 50 Shades of No, which was actually written by our colleague Robin. So that's actually a good book tip for how to be a good product owner, and all the variants of saying no, and kind of constraining and basically protecting your team from overload at every level. Given that, Bas says no problem. Well, thanks, Bas. So we'll just like last time. Any other questions that we have? So if everybody just wants to get this last chance, just dump your questions in the email or in the chat, and we'll see where we can answer. But given that it's closing time, I would like to ask both of you to have based on the discussion, if there is any closing words, final tips that you would like to share. Let's start with Theo. Theo, is there any closing words or final tips that you have?
So I think a little bit of a conclusion would be, the bottom is very important, the top is very important. Take them both into account, and transformation-wise, build up steps slowly and learn from that, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the learning I have and I want to give to everybody is that the change in the top is more hard than the change in the bottom.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and maybe if I would summarize it for myself in the end, I'd say make sure that the top is very well informed on how to protect that ecosystem, how to protect the rules of the game, and that they understand the game and that they don't break it. From the bottom up part, I'd say start making sure that you have good Lego blocks that are solid teams and that you can actually have that delivered so that'll work together. And the third thing, I do it like, but it's a bit of a personal thing. I really believe things like delegation canvases or the way we deal with distributing mandate and the mature conversation around that, and maybe a bit more formal conversation, will create the space that will allow like teams and sub-teams to actually take their mandate and be in that, as you say, more self-empowered.
Yeah. Nicely put, Serge.
Yes, thank you very much. So it is 11:01. We're just 1 minute over the time box. So thank you very much. Thank you, Theo. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, everybody who was here with us. We had fun doing this webinar. We'll hope to do many more for you, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.